All right, so now that we've done the lauric acid lab, we actually are going to take a look at this data and write at least part of a formal lab report. Now you will be doing full lab reports in the coming science classes that you take, but what we try to do as part of the ninth grade course is get you introduced to how we actually start this process and kind of I call it the meat and potatoes, the major stuff that you're going to need to do. So you will take a look at a separate video on creating your graph because I am going to have you use a graphing program to actually help you with this, and it will make it your life a lot easier and hopefully have you be a little less frustrated. So what you have is your writer's notebook, and please note that you have to submit this as part of your grade. All right, so looking at what you need to do, the first part is the overall task. So you're going to be reading some provided informational texts that we'll talk about here in a minute. You are going to write a lab report in which you analyze the data that you generated on the cooling of the lauric acid and provide evidence to clarify your analysis. And you're going to try to draw some conclusions and relate what we saw in the lauric acid lab to the things that we have learned in class. So what we have done is I've broken this down into several subtasks to help you. All right, so in the first part is actually stuff that you did in the lab. In the cooling curve lab, you will generate data which you will use to create a data table and graph. Using the information in the readings provided, you will analyze the data you generate and explain your findings. Okay, so in order to do that, we do need to cue in on some key vocabulary. And this key vocabulary, these 5 words, are actually things that we covered in our notes. So my expectation with your vocabulary is that I should see the definitions here on your writer's notebook, but it's not so much that I need to see the definitions in your lab report, but you need to show me that you understand what these words mean by their appropriate use within the context of your lab report. So I will be checking to make sure that you have defined them here, and if you have questions about your definitions, please ask, but you want to make sure in terms of the actual written lab report itself that you're actually using that information. All right, so where we really get started with the lab report is with the title. And this is just kind of review in terms of how we make good titles. Remember, this is not cute. This should be a formal writing format, and it needs to include both the independent and dependent variable. If you can't remember kind of my cheat way of creating a good title, make sure you go back and look at your data table and graph stuff from Unit 2. So you want to identify the independent and dependent variable, and then you are going to construct your title. That title will be the opening portion of your lab report that you are generating. All right, and once you're kind of through that, then we can move on to your subtask number 1, your results. And like it says here, this is the core of your lab report. This is where you should be spending your time and making sure that you are working through these different points appropriately. All right, this is where we include our tables and figures. And notice here that I have this information section here on specific to this lab. This tells you exactly what needs to happen in this lab report in terms of what I am looking for from the lauric acid. So for the lauric acid lab, you have to have a typed data table. Okay, it needs to be typed up. The data table needs to have its own title separate from the title of your lab report. Okay, you can use the insert table function on your Google Doc to create your table. And if you get to the end of the data table, like let's say I insert 10 rows, well, I'm going to need more than 10 rows. If you're in the last cell of your row, last row, just hit the tab and it will automatically add more rows for you as you need to. Okay, you want to type in your data. So you're going to basically take your scratch, kind of sloppy copy of your data table that you generated in the lab, and we're going to type it up in a nice, neat format. Okay, the temperature or the time should be in seconds, and the temperature should make sure it's in degrees Celsius and that you have your appropriate guess digit. The graph, like I said, I have a little separate video showing you how to use the Logger Pro software to actually generate your graph. The time in seconds are on the x-axis and the temperature will be on the y-axis. I know it says this will be done on paper and handed in, but like I said, I'm actually changing that. I want you to try to do it on the computer. It will also nicely and neatly insert this into your lab report for you. Okay. Now this part here, the third bullet point, you will need to do on a separate sheet of paper just simply because typing this is kind of difficult. You are going to calculate the percent error of the experimental freezing point, the one that you measured, versus the actual freezing point of the lauric acid. And here is your equation. Okay, percent error equals the actual freezing point, that's the one that I give to you here, and minus the experimental freezing point. So you take that value, you divide it by the actual freezing point, and then multiply by 100. Your unit on this is going to be a percent. Okay, so with this, okay, sorry about that. I just needed to get something really quickly. So in order for you to actually perform this calculation, you need the actual freezing point of lauric acid, which is going to be 43.8, and then the unit is going to be degrees. Well, obviously it didn't insert. Degrees Celsius. Okay, so just put the degree sign in there. Okay. Just some general points about tables and figures. Your data tables should be easy to read and organized. If it is possible, an individual table should not be split onto 2 pages. Notice I say here, and this is very important, this may not be possible with this lab. We have a lot of data. This took a long time, and that's okay, all right? But in general, what we try to do is make sure that our data tables don't split across pages if we can avoid it. Okay, make sure you include units and sig figs with your measurements, and be sure to label and title all tables. Make sure with your graph that you have your axes labeled and the directions for that and the unit of measurement for each variable are on the other video. And a key, we don't have more than one line on this graph, so we really don't have to worry about that. This part, include a caption with all graphs and data tables. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so you need to make sure that you have a caption with each data table. So you're going to have one data table and one graph. All right, it needs to describe the type of data, and there's an example. Figure 1, which would be a graph, table 1 would refer to your data table, shows that a larger male crayfish tended to exhibit more attack behavior than smaller ones. Okay, so you want to kind of generally describe what's going on with the data in terms of the data table as well as your graph. And that is something that is very, very important. All right. Then you're going to actually write one paragraph that identifies the trends and provides evidence and clarifies your analysis. So in that paragraph, specific to this lab, very important, okay, you need to include each of the findings. You need to state the temperature of the substance while it is freezing. For some of you, this may be a single temperature. It stayed at the same temperature for a very long period of time. For some of you, it may be a very narrow range, like it changed like maybe a tenth or so, but again, over a long period of time. Okay, the actual freezing point, so you need to state that, and you were given that above. The percent error, so you actually need to state what that percent error is. So basically we're kind of taking all of this stuff and we're putting it into words. And then the trends or patterns that you see in your data. Okay, so this is kind of an important part of your lab report. The second subtask deals with your discussion and background. And this is really where we get into the provided informational text. You need to write at least one paragraph that explains your results. Okay, and talks about the conclusions that you can draw. Now, You will need to include the information from the following as well as what is discussed below. So I have a series of questions here that are meant to actually help you develop this paragraph. The first question has you look at the graph itself and identifying what energy changes are happening. Where's the kinetic energy changing and where's the potential energy changing? If you can't remember how this all works, you may want to look back at your notes where we talked about the phase changes and I think we had a couple graphs and we did kind of outline that. Okay. As a substance cools, based on what we know about energy, what is happening to the arrangement? Okay, if you want to think of a different word for arrangement, think of position. That should give you a clue. What is happening to them? A general thing here is improvements to the experiment. How could we make this experiment better? And this is making sure that our results are valid. It doesn't mean that the experiment itself was bad or any problems with it, but how can we make sure that the results that we got are the true results for our sample of lauric acid? Again, if you need to kind of think about that, we did talk about ways to improve experiments in Unit 1 when we were talking about the scientific method. Same thing with number 4, possible sources of error in the results. Remember, human error is not okay. Be specific and list what the error was and what it would do to your data and to your conclusions. In other words, why isn't your percent error 0? Okay, that's basically what you're trying to answer. But it can't be a human mistake, because with a human mistake, you would just go back and restart the lab. All right, further areas to investigate. Now, once we get to this one, we can actually start using some of those informational texts. But, what other things could we study about lauric acid? So just suggest something. The final 3 questions are really based on the informational texts about lauric acid. And so I should have one paragraph with the first 5 questions, and it can be more. And then I should have one that gives us some background information on lauric acid. These informational texts, you are not to use Google. You are actually to go to my Moodle page. Okay, so this is what my Moodle page looks like for those of you who have never ever been there. And you're going to scroll down. We are in the energy, temperature, and phase changes unit. And you want to use these 3 articles: WebMD on lauric acid, the University of Bristol site for lauric acid. Now this 3rd site, the changes of state and changes of phase, will actually also help you with some of those earlier questions. So, and none of these websites are very big or very long. What they are there to do, though, is meant to help you. Like, this is the change of state and change of phase one. That's really it. Okay, there's not a lot of information there. Okay, but it does help you in terms of your lab report. Okay, now when you're using these, you are going to need to cite the information in a works cited. Okay, and I actually have an MLA citations page for you. Okay, the WebMD article, the University of Bristol site, and the changes of phase. Now notice here I have a 4th one. This is actually referring you to your textbook, specifically Chapter 3, Section 3. You may also use that to help you with your background in research in terms of things on phase changes. I highly suggest you use that. We have textbooks here and available in the room, so use those to your advantage. You don't have to keep carrying it home. Now, these citations, all you have to do is copy paste them right into your document, are for the end of the paper works cited, which we'll get to here in a little bit. But what you need to do is also do some in-text citations. So that means if I'm citing, blah, 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 and then I have fact, okay, that's thrown in there. I got that fact from someplace, probably one of these readings. So let's say I got it from the WebMD article. I just have to give it credit like that. It's a parenthetical citation. If I'm going to do it from the websites, okay, so that one is WebMD. The second one we would just do May. That's the author's last name. The 3rd one for the changes of phase or state, we're just going to call it changes. And for the textbook, you do have to do something a little bit different. You're going to put Y session, but then you're going to put a page number. Let's say page 86. Okay, just so you, because you do have an actual page number from an actual physical thing, whereas on the websites we don't. Okay, so those are parenthetical citations that we should see at least someplace, because you did not get these facts or ideas from yourself. All right, so then using the information, specifically the WebMD website and the University of Bristol site, we've got those 3 questions about lauric acid that we will turn into a paragraph. All right, so, and in there you need to cite at least 2 sources. Make sure to include those citations in your works cited. So I don't need to see all 4 of them parenthetically cited, but I should see at least 2 of them. You do need to cite after each statement in which you use use that reference, because it's not okay just to cite everything in a paragraph and then throw everything at the end. It doesn't work that way. Okay. And it gives you some other examples of citing parenthetically. And then at the very end, you will have a works cited. Okay. There's the works cited again, and I provided it to you on my Moodle page so that it's easier for you to copy and paste. All right, so we are actually going to be working on this in school for the next few days, including when I get back. So make sure that you are working on this. If you have any questions, please feel free to either get in touch with me, talk to me, or email me. You are welcome to work on this outside of class, but you are going to be provided with quite a bit of time in class to actually get this done.